All right. Hemostasis, clotting, wonderfulness, a nice intricate network that is such a wonderful blessing that helps you not die out with just a paper cut, but it can also be a vengeful being if it's imbalanced or activated in an inappropriate time, such as when you create a clot for a heart attack. Now, let's go ahead and dive into this just a wee bit. So first off, there's a couple of ways that we can go ahead and try and stop the bleeding. If you've cut a vessel or some type of thing or a capillary, what you're going to see is some type of vascular spasm. A vascular spasm is just a way that the vein will try and pinch off, or whatever blood vessel you've cut will try and pinch off the flow of blood, so it kind of just slows down that flow out of your body. You could also form a platelet plug, which is just a conglomeration of platelets trying to do its job and stop its flow. Or you could get a bunch of proteins that work hard together to create a coagulation or a blood clot. Now, a plate plug formation, that is if you have some type of owie or boo-boo on the inside that has allowed collagen, a protein that is usually binding cells together or is inside the cell, is exposed. Again, in a blood cell, in a blood vessel, it is not natural to see collagen sticking out. If it's sticking out, platelets are going to go ahead, ooh, what's this thing? And become infatuated, kind of like little door dilly bob that tries to, or the thing behind a door that just allows the door to hit against the wall and it makes the little sproing noise. I was infatuated by that when I was a kid. These clotting factors, these platelets, they notice this collagen and go, ooh, what's this? And they start playing with it and they become active. This activation activates more platelets, which can create this type of plug so that blood or damaged tissues won't affect the outside or other tissues. There is a blood clot formation. Notice that this actually requires something other than the blood clot, or activates something other than the blood clot. It activates something that creates an active form of a protein called fibrin. Early on during the owie or boo-boo, the fibrin comes out. It's kind of weak. It's not really doing its job. It's kind of sticky, but it's still letting some of those red blood cells flow out. But as the signaling pathway continues to progress and strengthen, these fibrins are encouraged to keep on building and growing and strengthening. There are two ways you can activate a blood clotting factor: an extrinsic pathway and an intrinsic pathway. Both of these pathways are destined to activate a specific protein that actually makes that fibrin, or activates that fibrin, and eventually activates also and strengthens that fibrin as well. In fact, this process is quite intricate. It has about 13 different clotting factors. And if any of them are sort of out of balance or out of whack, you kind of get either mild or severe cases of a hemophilia, meaning that you can't really stop the bleeding. Here it is that what the graph that the book has put out outlines the extrinsic, intrinsic factor, as well as, again, notice that they come together into the common pathway to activate this enzyme called thrombin, which also eventually activates fibrin and strengthens it via other means. We'll get into more detail in describing those here shortly. Let's take this piece by piece, starting off with the extrinsic pathway. The extrinsic pathway, remember that extra or out usually means outside. So extraterrestrial, or ET, means from the outside or outside of this world. So extrinsic, it's something that's happening on the outside that has caused this damage. A tissue damage in this case. If the tissue becomes damaged, it goes, owie, and it goes around and then crying to its mama. It does so by releasing the tissue factor. A tissue factor will cause that muscle spasm, or that spasming, to go ahead and seal up that cut, which will then also stimulate a couple of processes, calcium being released, activating the factors 10 and 5 to create this prothrombinase and be able to start this common pathway. Again, the key feature here is that tissue factor that's saying, uh-oh, we've got a boo-boo. Let's go ahead and take care of this. The intrinsic pathway is more of, we got an uh-oh on the inside. You got a cut in a cell. You got some of the cells separating off. It's allowing some of that blood to come out. That collagen is exposed. Maybe you got some damaged platelets. Both of those can go ahead and activate the intrinsic pathway via the activation of factor 12 as well as calcium, which both combined activate again, factor X and factor 5, which will go ahead and activate the common pathway. There's another way that can happen is, remember that collagen, the platelet plug formation going, oh, there's a boo-boo here, and they're going to play with the little doorstop going, well, yeah, the platelets become activated, and it releases its key factors. We're just going to go ahead and say, which activates the factor X as well as does some other things, which again activates the prothrombinase, which then leads into the common pathway. So again, there's two ways to activate this intrinsic pathway. It is the exposure of this collagen or maybe a damaged platelets, which goes through the activation of factor 12, or the platelets are going ahead and playing with that little door stopper, and they become activated. The collagen fibers, they become activated, which also co-stimulates factor X and other factors to make certain it goes well. So there it is. There's that pathway in yellow, activated X, and activated platelets marked in red to go ahead and get that going. Now that we've discussed the extrinsic pathway and the intrinsic pathway, let's go ahead and hit up the common pathway. Extrinsic, intrinsic pathway, whichever one, has now activated prothrombinase. This common pathway, let's stick with common pathway before I sneak over to the prothrombinase. This common pathway, its main objective is to activate and strengthen fibrin. Some quick notes to make about this. Number one, prothrombin, or any hormone, any type of thing that has pro on it, means that it's in an inactive form. It has to be modified, cleaved, added on, what have you, most likely cleaved in some type of way, in order for the active form to occur. So this prothrombinase, remember that ACE refers to any type of enzyme, is usually with any type of protein that has an ACE at the end of it is some type of enzyme. This prothrombinase processes prothrombin into thrombin. Thrombin, what it does with calcium is it go ahead and changes fibrinogen into fibrin. That's another indicator of something needing to be a protein needing to be modified in order to become active. The active form of fibrinogen is fibrin. Fibrin's inactive form is called fibrinogen. Fibrinogen is floating around in your blood. It's not in its inactive form. If it were active, we'd have some issues. You'd get some sticky tape all over the place. I like calling fibrin the sticky tape because it really sticks everything together. So this thrombin changes this inactive fibrinogen into active fibrin. Now, thrombin doesn't just do that. You'll notice that it has a couple of other roles here. It also activates factor 13, which also will strengthen the fibrin threads. Thrombin also has a role in it. If you remember back to AMP1, there is a positive feedback here in clotting. As soon as thrombin's activated, that thrombin goes back, activates factor 5, activates the platelets, which both of them continue to feed into this prothrombinase and activating it. It's only shut off when the signal is gone. It gets shut off when finally you're not losing that blood anymore. You're not getting the little door stopper there or what have you. Okay. Here's a list of all the different factors. If you're in pathophysiology, you most likely will get a couple of additions into getting to know what they do. For instance, for pathophysiology, you need to know that factor 9 has a role in hemolytic factor in hemophilia B, while factor 8 has a role in hemophilia A. If hemophilia A is the lack or disturbance or of this factor 8, while hemophilia B has the lack of this factor 9. Some other things that you should be aware of is that these plugs actually tighten up and close up the damaged vessel, as well as vitamin K. Vitamin K is an essential vitamin, the clot formation. Vitamin K is used in the synthesis of 4 different clotting factors. If you're worried about hemophilia A and B missing just one factor, if you're missing all 4 factors because you don't have enough vitamin K, oh boy, woof, you're in trouble. Now, I did mention earlier that there is a chance that if there is a clot that's forming that you don't want, there is something called a protein called plasmin, which will dissolve it. It is an enzyme, and it is lytic, and it is a good thing that it is around because you do not want clots floating around in your blood, causing an embolism or some type of blockage or some type of stroke. Quick note, especially for you out there that are doing a pathophysiology path, notice, especially if you're talking hypercalcemia, the balance of your electrolytes, note this. Look at all that calcium. If you are low, aka hypo, in calcemia, do you think you'll be able to clot as well? Most definitely not. Surprisingly as well, if you have too much calcium, it has a little bit of an inhibitory effect on clotting as well. Here's a cute little picture of Alexei Romanov. This is by Klimbin. I apologize if I said it wrong. She's colorized this photo. It's a very lovely photo. This young gentleman was the last of the line of the czars in Russia in the very early 1900s. He had hemophilia B. He had lacked that factor 9. It is part of the intrinsic factor. So if you had some type of issues where collagen was exposed or you had activated platelets, you didn't really have a chance to activate the common pathway via the intrinsic pathway. So this young gentleman suffered a lot. He got bruisings that wouldn't heal up. It was a very painful, horrendous experience for the tyke, and he died quite young because of this complication. With that, that is the end of hemostasis. Good luck in your studies. I believe in you. And remember, you got this.